Welcome to this first episode of a number, I don't know how many yet, episodes we're going to shoot, trying to explain how we feel, how we understand ISO standards, ISO management standards, and especially we're going to go into depth about ISO 45001 naturally. We have a special relationship to that standard, so I would very much like to explain how I see and how I expect it to be used. But first of all, we have to look into the overall high-level structure of these new ISO standards and what that have achieved in actually working with standards altogether, and how we can organize standards so they can support each other in a much more thorough way than they could prior. When you looked at the old standards from 2004 and 2008 and so forth, these standards were very much, not alike at all. And looking at the figures we had in the beginning, trying to explain what the standards were all about, you didn't get much information from that on how to put standards together. One thing though I have to make very clear is that there's a lot of people that believe, and fair enough, that when we have implemented the high-level structure, we more or less have one-fits-all standard to follow. Say that we have the same procedures for all standards, we have risk management thinking for all standards, and so on and so forth. The problem is though that looking into the details, that it's not really that simple. If you look into the processes, for instance, a very good approach for standards. I must say that following processes, but there's a great difference between the processes you have to follow when you talk quality, when you talk environment, and when you talk about health and safety. It's not the same set of processes you have to follow, even though we say that top management need to implement the management system into the business processes of the organization. That's still true. But the problem is that if I follow a process looking at quality, I will follow different information and different steps on the way than I will follow if I follow health and safety. Otherwise, I will not get the information needed in order to support my health and safety, nor my my quality if I had it to do it the same way. And there's many different examples that tells us that these standards, even though they look alike, they have the same structure, the high-level structure, which is very good, and so on and so forth. They still are different standards, and they need to be. And we need to take care of this the differences that we have, the focus areas that are so much different from the one standard to the next. Another example we can bring on is that a lot of people would very much like to have just one definition for risk. And that is very appealing. If we could just have one definition for risk, that would be so much easier for everybody to work with. I believe that we at the moment have about 75 different definitions for risk. And you can say, whoa, that's a lot of definitions. And it sure is, but it's not enough. I think we need more than that. I think we need to be much more specific, rather than just say one fits all, because then we'll not have really what we're aiming at. The problem here is that we're looking at risk. The risk definition and the standard risk definition that goes in all three standards, the three or how many we have at the moment, says that risk is an effect of an uncertainty. And that's very true. But the problem is that in that lies that risk can be positive and negative. It can be, beneficial or not beneficial. And that's fair enough, looking at it from a quality point of view. But looking at it from a health and safety point of view, I believe that risk is negative, always. And risk is something you have to deal with, and risk is something you have to mitigate, and risk is something you have to minimize. If you look at the 45001, you will see that we have the standard risk definition says that risk is effect of an uncertainty. And then we have the other risk, the OH&S risk, which is a combination of likelihood and so on and so forth, that actually is much more specific for the focus area of the standard, and it must be. If we have just had the overall risk definition, I don't believe that many people will really understand what risk is all about. So by having one definition that fits all, we actually remove the focus area, what is essential for the standard. We take that out of the standard and substitute it with something that is not really saying anything. So I'm a strong believer in having all definitions of risk, having specific definitions of risk depending on the area you're working with, because then you really can attack your problem in the right way. So bear that in mind when you do work with 9001, 14001, 45001, and all the rest of the standards, not to mention all of them. You have to bear in mind that when you do your clause 4, you can have all the interested parties, you can attack them in the same way, you can attack the unit and major risk and so on and so forth. But when you get down to the processes in 4.3, things start to divide. You will have to look into different processes, even though the overall process may be named the same. That could be production, for instance. But within the production, you have to go different ways to actually deal with your health and safety, and deal with the environment, and deal with quality. With that said, I have opened up, I'm afraid, Pandora's box for a lot of discussion, and that's fair enough. I have my opinion on this, and I'm a strong believer in that we have to be very careful in one fits all. But on the other hand, if you bear this in mind when you build up your system, you can benefit enormously by having the right approach throughout the standard, remembering the focus area on each and every standard you're working with. So, thank you for listening to this very first overall part of management systems, ISO management systems altogether. In the next episode, I will get into more specifics about how to do the analysis of interested parties, how to do the analysis of major risk and opportunities, and so on and so forth. And I will, on the first chapter, I will try to do that in the concept of looking at all three standards at one time, but remembering what I just said. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will stay tuned and listen to what we have to say on the next episode that is coming up. Thank you very much.